Alex T. Duffy was born almost a century ago on January 7, 1900. He was delivered the son of Stuart and Anna O'Neill Duffy at the family home on what is now Duffy Street. He was the youngest of 6 children. Mr. Duffy, namesake of Watertown's fairgrounds, was president of the Jefferson County Agricultural Society for more than 3 decades. But he was also a sports legend, historian, world-renowned poultry breeder, and stonemason. Mr. Duffy spent several decades sharing his life experiences and observations with Northern New Yorkers, from talks with elementary school children and college students to discussions with senior citizens several years his junior. On his 90th birthday, Alex remarked, "You name it, I've seen it." His memories of old Watertown were always at the forefront. His rich life and vivid memories provide us with an opportunity to share an evening with Mr. Watertown.
I fell in love with Watertown when I was 15 or 16. My dad took me around to various jobs. I can't explain it to you. But I thought to myself, this is where I'd like to live. I had many chances. Had pretty good prices to go around different places. And Decoration Day was a big day. Going with my father as a real youngster and mother that took me. I was a baby, a family of 6. Going with them to the cemetery on Arthur Street to put flowers on our family's grave. And I did that all the rest of my life. I was 16 and I had 2 friends by the name of McDermott, Harry and Jack. And they were paper boys. And they came over one night to have supper with us. And I had been approached on that, but everything I did through my mother's guidance. There were no ifs or ands. And Harry McDermott said, "Miss Duffy, Allie could make a lot of money." He said, "We go in all the saloons and you can sell them. They give you more than the cost of paper." Well, Mother said, "Charles, if that's what you want, that's your business. My boy's not going to the saloons." And I thought she was being very harsh. So my dad and a man who ran the saloon for the Crystal Lunch in the Belvedere Saloon, very famous saloon in Watertown. And that building was there since 1848, by the way. And Mike Devine ran it, and he went out of business when Prohibition came. Mike was along in years, and he'd been a very popular man. And he said to my dad, "Why don't you let Alex go? He's a popular kid." My father said, "My wife objects to him." Well, Mike said, "Couldn't we pull a game on her?" My father said, "I'm not sure of that." So I could tell papers around town as long as I didn't go in saloons. And they fixed it up. My dad was alderman of Watertown, knew all the saloons in Watertown, knew everything in Watertown, and talked it over with his friends. And they said, "Well, just tell him to come to the front door and rap on the door and say, 'Mr. Duffy's kid's here with papers.' And don't tell his mother about it at all." Well, they didn't tell me about it. Mother wouldn't have let me do it, I know that. So I peddled papers a couple of years before she knew about it. And she was death on saloons. She didn't like a lot of the older people were. And when I did go to the saloons, people all knew me then. And I did a hell of a business selling papers. made a lot more friends. Mr. Devine, he said, "Don't you ever forget, young man, I got you a job." I said, "I want Mr. Devine." I said, "Mother's angry at you." He said, "Oh, I know, Anna. I can talk my way through that one." Mayor Graham called me up and he said, "They tell me you know something about River Street." I said, "Who?" "Who are they?" He said, "A lot of people." I had a friend who later became business manager for the Watertown Daily Times, Gordon Bryant, very close friend. We both went to Moon Street School. And some of his relatives died in Vermont. And his mother and father, Bug he had a sister, Elizabeth, very pretty girl. And they, of course, decided in those days there were things like that. You went to your people's in distress. And he come down, asked Mother if she would let me take over his paper setup. And Mother said, "Well, I knew Mother, I could see her yet." She said, "Where is the paper room?" Well, he said, "Down Court Street and down River Street." "No, Gordon," she said, "he won't be on River Street." And went to my dad. And my dad said, "Well, that's a part of the ship my wife was running. Maybe we can come up with some idea." I would rap on the door when I went up to the place and just say, "Stuart Duffy's boys here." And then you'd hear the man inside say, "Anybody want Times or Standard? Paper boys out here now, Stuart's kid." And I sold more paper than any of them because my dad was well known. And Mother never knew about that for some years later. We never told her.